Hi, I'm Andrew McCrae. Welcome to our farm and ranch in northwest Missouri. My great-great-grandfather settled here in 1910, and I'm the fifth generation to grow crops and livestock here. As a farmer myself, I know the highs and lows of this life, the issues we confront every day, some new, some as old as farming itself. This show is a place to talk with farmers and others in the ag industry about topics that mean something to us, topics that can improve the present and future of our operations. This is Farming the Countryside. Kenny Hartman Jr. is from Waterloo, Illinois, and serves as the current National Corn Growers President. When we recently sat down to visit at a conference, we discussed some of the issues he and the NCGA are working on at the national and even international levels. What might a new administration do to help or hurt the corn market? How is the cost of money influencing decisions on the farm? What can we do to create a strong market for corn? And what are some of the other challenges ahead? Here's our conversation. Kenny, you're from Waterloo, Illinois. Let's talk about, first of all, what kind of crop season was it out there?
Well, we ended up with some pretty good crops, actually, but it's been a challenging year. You know, we planted corn fairly early, and what we got planted early was pretty good, except then we had like 3 weeks of rain in the end of April, May, so then the last of our corn got planted at the end of May. We raised corn, soybeans, and wheat, so got that out. Had some pretty good weather over the summer, so we ended up this fall with some pretty good crops. We do have some river bottom ground, so some of that did get flooded when the rivers were up. But overall, we've had a very good corn crop and about an average bean crop.
Many people have had a good crop, but on the other side, they're wondering how to market the crop. Any ideas that you have for us to make those bushels worth as much as they can be in this climate?
Well, it's definitely a challenge right now. I know we're at National Corn Growers, we're hoping that we can create some demand and get some raise some prices here. It's really challenging, you know, with that $3.50 to $4 corn area in the local markets, but we're hoping that we can get some things passed. You know, right now we're working on next E15, which would be good to have 15% all over the United States instead of, you know, right now we have basically that 8 states will be able to have E15 year round, but we need that on all 50 states so we can advance that market. And then obviously one other thing we're working on is the Next Generation Fuel Act, which would get us up to 25% blends throughout the whole United States, but we're hoping to eventually get that passed.
Let's talk about that for a moment, because people always hear about that, but they may wonder where we're at. So E15, some people say, well, that's been around for a long time, but what is it we're trying to get passed right now in this lame duck session?
Well, currently there's an issue in some places in the United States where when you look at over the summer months, there's a vapor pressure concern. So because of that, when you get in the summer months, they're not allowed in certain areas to sell E15 because of that. So we're hoping to get this passed where we can sell E15 all year round. You know, certain areas around like St. Louis, Chicago, they can sell E15 all year round because it's a different mix of fuels. But when you get out in the rural America, you get out to the east and west coast, they don't have that in their containment areas. So that's why we need E15 everywhere, so it's available. It gives consumers choice. And you know, ethanol is a great thing because it's environmentally friendly. It's a cheaper product as far as fuel. And, I mean, we've got plenty of corn and we've got plenty of ethanol, so we can, you know, it's win-win for all parties.
You mentioned the next generation, so what do we do then to get to 20 and 25?
The Next Generation Fuel Act is an act that's basically been in the House and the Senate. It has a lot of components to advance ethanol, but one of the major components there is having a certification fuel of up to 20-25% blends. That way the automotive industry can actually build engines for higher ethanol blends. And if you look at it, this is where the world's going. You know, right now, in Brazil right now, they're at 27% ethanol going to 30%. So there's already automotive manufacturing that they're selling engines and cars for that. There's discussion right now. India's looking at going to higher blends. I know Japan was using ETBE, and now they're switching over to ethanol to go to higher blends of ethanol. So we feel like, you know, the world is going with higher blends of ethanol. We just need to domestically to get us up into them blends because, you know, right now the ethanol's here. I know we're not necessarily against electric cars, but we want a level playing field. And there's a lot of concerns, you know, with the grid and things with electric cars where ethanol's here and it's clean for the environment. It's definitely environmentally friendly.
You mentioned electric cars and so forth. I'm interested as an NCGA officer, what are the headwinds that you find that you have to overcome to get that message across and hopefully move towards that?
Well, the big thing right now is ethanol is here today. Ethanol is being, there's plenty of ethanol in the market. We can go higher blends of ethanol fairly easily. E15, any car that's produced 2000 or that's been made 2001 on can use E15. So we need to educate people that they can use that. And in my area, if you go pull up to the E15 pump, it's 20 some cents cheaper. So we need to educate them on that. And then the other half is just we keep pushing. We need a level playing field for all forms of energy. So that's one of the things that we keep talking and working on. So
let's talk about other areas that are on your mind. Obviously, we have a new administration that will be coming in. It's new, but we've had 4 years in the past, so maybe we have a bit of a track record. Just overall right now, the feelings on what might be coming ahead as we look to the Trump administration in January.
Well, obviously, congratulations to our President Trump. We worked with him before, and we've done it. We worked for a very, very good relationship with his past administration. One of the things that we look at, we need trade agreements. We're hoping that he will work on trade agreements. He was instrumental in working on USMCA. It was a great trade agreement. Right now, Mexico is our largest purchaser of corn. We've got about 15% of our market does go to exports. We want to advance that, obviously, because we've got plenty of corn. So we're hoping that we can work with him to work on new trade agreements. For example, India or some of the Asian countries to work on some of these. We know he likes to work on individual ones, so we're hoping that he can do that. So we're definitely, we're hoping that we can get some of that done with that administration.
I think farmers are wondering, okay, are we headed for more tariffs? Does that end up hurting me as a corn grower, or what are the opportunities? I'm sure it's almost a crystal ball type of question, but just curious what your thoughts are.
Well, we definitely, we understand that tariffs are not good for us, especially when you're talking about if we put a tariff on a country and then we turn around and Brazil comes in and takes over some of their markets. But Brazil's a prime example that's frustration because they have they can sell ethanol to us for like a 2% tariff, but when we market ethanol back to Brazil, it's an 18% tariff. So these are the kind of things that we're hoping that the administration works on to make a level playing field in that arena.
Legislatively, what other things are top of mind right now that you're out there talking with folks about?
Well, one of the things that we are talking about is, there's a marker bill out there for concerns with the economy. Right now, corn prices, soybean prices, we've got an inflation factor. Putting a crop out has gotten very expensive. Fuel prices are up. Interest rates are up. So they're concerned there. So we're hoping that we can get some type of economic help or economic package out here to our farmers to help them to get through these times. And then obviously the big thing is, we've been kicking a farm bill down the road here a year, and now hopefully we can get something done in lame duck that we don't end up kicking it down the road for another year. Because, basically the farm bill is based on 2018 numbers. And we need, right now, some of our priorities at National Corn Growers with the farm bill is, risk management. In that farm bill, there's opportunities for higher insurance levels. Right now with the risk, we need farmers to take higher levels of insurance. So there's some help with that. There's also MAP and FMD doubling, which right now that would be really good because of the fact that's market development money. So we can get markets developed overseas. That hasn't been raised for many, many years, so this would double that permanently. And then, obviously you have the Title I areas that would help support some of the issues we have right now with lower prices. And then, voluntary conservation issues is another thing that we want to make sure that we're working with.
You mentioned the conservation issues, and I wanted to get to that. On your farm, but also as you're talking with other farmers, how do we continue the push of conservation, sustainability? These seem to be things that are going to continue to be things not only from a government perspective, but just from how we grow our crops and how consumers want them grown.
Well, when it comes to, I think U.S. farmers are very sustainable. We've adopted a lot of new practices. We've got a lot of new technology. I know myself, we've no-tilled our soybeans for many, many years. We're no-tilling a lot of our corn now that we didn't do maybe a few years ago because of precision agriculture and just tools in the toolbox that we've gotten to use that help us do some of these practices. I know now we're also doing a lot of cover crops compared to what we used to. And, this is definitely helps conservation, helps keep the fertilizer levels in the ground. So these are some of the things that I think are really helping U.S. farmers, and we're advancing to keep that going, to be profitable.
Kenny, in the time we have left, I want to go back to your farm for just a moment. Walk me through any decisions you're making this year. Is in a time of tighter times, do you look at cutting costs in any certain areas, or how do you make the math, in a sense, work as we move to a new year?
Well, it's definitely challenging. I know, basically we're looking at where we can cut costs. If it's right now machinery is so expensive, so we're not spending the money that we spent a few years ago on equipment. We've got to keep it going. We're also looking at ways that we can be more conservative when it comes to fertilizer, chemicals, and seeds. So I mean, it's definitely a challenge right now. But at the same time, you've got to put the fertilizer on. You've got to do a good job in order to get that good yield that we've had in the past.
Yeah. Do you think that the cost of money is impacting us in agriculture yet? Are we seeing that as far as the land and the machinery and so forth? Because interest is going to cost us more now on the balance sheet.
Well, interest is definitely has been a challenge right now in the last year or so, especially with some of these operating notes. So, and that's one of the concerns that we have right now is there are some farmers in the Midwest and the southern parts of the states that are probably going to have some challenges getting an operating note next year just because of where we're at with prices. So that's why, National Corn Growers' big push is, obviously to help farmers today, but we need new markets. We need to figure out ways that we can get markets, if it's overseas, if it's ethanol, higher blends. These are all things, one thing I didn't talk about here is, or long-term, we're looking at sustainable aviation fuel. We think that's a huge market. We're talking about, 50 billion gallons of aviation fuel over the years. Ethanol to jet is definitely one of them opportunities we feel like. And I know I had some folks from Boeing at my farm last year kind of learn about agriculture. And, they're really excited about it. They really think that ethanol to jet is one of the ways we can go. But, again, it's a 50 billion gallon market, so we can share that market.
Well, we're just getting started in that market, right?
Yes, definitely. It's definitely something to look for the future, and we're definitely working on that too.
Kenny, I appreciate the time. Wish you all the best in the new coming year.
Well, thank you very much, and I always enjoy talking to you folks, and anytime you want to talk, give us a call.
In the second half of this week's show, I visited with Kyle Durham, a corn and soybean farmer from Norburn, Missouri, who also serves on the United Soybean Board. We talked about what he saw on his farm this year and how that impacts his decisions for 2025. We also got into some of the issues he and other farmers are working on through the USB. What are the supply side and demand side issues that are being addressed? How might carbon and sustainability programs impact the markets? We covered this and much more as we looked at the soybean market.
Kyle, you farm in Norburn, Missouri. Just talk about the crop year this year. How were the corn and beans for you?
Every time we look at a weather year, Andrew, it never seems to be average by any stretch of the imagination. And this year didn't disappoint either. But what we found was we got the right amount of moisture at the right times in the growing season. We were able to put some corn and some beans in the ground a little earlier than most years. And across soil types, whether it was a heavy clay or a light sand, things turned out really well in our neck of the woods this year.
We both farm in Missouri, although we farm a little ways apart. I'm curious, have you had earlier planting seasons than ever before? Because our planting season, it seems like, has been earlier the last few years than I can ever remember.
Yeah, we see that planting window opening up earlier and earlier, it seems like. And we see a lot of farmers that are, maybe not as risk adverse to even trying to put some beans in a lot earlier. Some of the early research that we've seen funded by the Checkoff and other places shows that there's some benefit. But, everybody's kind of got to weigh the risks against. You never know when that last frost is going to come through.
Right. Do you plant your beans and corn at the same time, or do you have one that you do in front of the other where you're at?
We typically will plant the corn first and then come in with the beans. Though this year we did have some farmers around us that came in and they put beans in the ground before they did corn. So, all things are in flux.
As you travel around, do you find it interesting as you talk to fellow producers? I think where we farm in the more the northern part of Missouri, it's common corn becomes before beans. But that even seems to be switching here. But a lot of places I go, they say, why do you do what you're doing? It's always beans before corn.
Yeah. I think a lot of that is just the historical and traditional nature of farming, as it's passed down from generation to generation. But those are the sorts of exciting things that we like to look at. Those of us that are kind of numbers and data nerds, I guess, for lack of a better word, we like to see those trials, go side by side and see how these sorts of things stack up, and always kind of to challenge the conventional wisdom and just see where we come out.
Are you pretty much alternating year after year crop rotation of corn and beans and corn back and forth on those acres?
We're probably about 60-40 soybeans, just because of the soil types and other management issues that we have to take into consideration on the farm. But here the last couple of years we have moved closer to probably a 50-50 rotation.
Do you find this year beans or corn will be more profitable? I know it depends on where you're marketing and how you got things done, but what do you find on your farm?
Well, it's always kind of a delicate balance, and what we've seen lately is a little bit of strength in the corn market, maybe a little more than beans. Where that's all going to shake out, here in the new year and everything is going to be really hard to tell. A lot of the break-even calculations are going to rely on nutrient prices in the spring, is when a lot of folks are going to put those on in our area. So, it's something that we continue to keep an eye on. Obviously, there's more profit potential, I guess, maybe in corn, but like I said, it's all going to come down to fertilizer price, I think, in the end.
Well, as you think through the process of going into next year, are there places you're looking to cut money or invest money, or how do we make the most out of a year that can be a tighter margin, do you think?
Well, I don't think this is something that we do in a specific year necessarily, in my opinion anyway. Ours has kind of been a long-term strategy where we've incorporated things like, variable rate application and grid sampling on the farm so that we can really dial in what's necessary and what isn't. And I think what we've seen anyway is that even when it comes to, variable rating a seed prescription, is there are savings to be had that maybe we weren't realizing in the past. And like I said, when we crunch those data numbers, those nerds of us, there's money to be made in those margins.
Well, in other words, you find that using those technologies has been something that you would do regardless of the time, whatever year it is.
Yeah, absolutely. That's we moved to variable rating and grid sampling of our fields 8-10 years ago, and we're grid sampling a third of our acres every year, and working on our recommendations for nutrients based on those. And then the seed prescriptions, when you look at your yield maps and you've got areas, variable soil conditions that maybe are kind of a drag to the rest of the field, and you can cut the population and not lose any yield in those areas. You've saved yourself money on the front end of it.
Let's talk about your role at USB. First of all, just broadly tell folks what kind of area you're spending most of your time in that role.
Yeah, I'm a pretty brand new director. I've been on about a year now, but my work group is the supply side of innovation and technology. So we're working on things that are going to accelerate the breeding pipeline so that so even if we are not developing the traits that are going into farmers' fields, we're investing in the tools that help soybean breeders to bring those traits to market quicker.
So talk about some of those then. What are some of the types of things that we see as a result of that research that's taking place?
Well, obviously, one of the biggest things is the growth of traded soybean that we've seen across the countryside. When it started with Roundup back in the 90s, it achieved a pretty dominant market share very quickly because farmers saw the value in that trait and adopted it quickly. Now, today, we have several different traits out there, and we're seeing the same things we do with Roundup, that the efficacy of that over time wanes as it becomes more and more widely adopted. And so what's going to be that next mode of crop protection? We can't predict that, obviously, but what we can do is we can fund the basic and background research that helps plant breeders to identify markers within the soybean genome and any other number of tools that then become helpful to them.
I'm sure that research is not only important, but it takes a while for that to move through the pipeline. Hopefully you're making that pipeline shorter, I guess you'd say.
Absolutely. That's the goal at the end is how do we shorten that and speed that time to market for these new and novel discoveries. One of the most recent checkoff wins when it comes to soybean traits is a new resistance to soybean-cyst nematode, which is the number one yield robber of soybean across the United States. And being able to get this out to market and into varieties that farmers are growing, we think is going to have a huge economic impact across the soybean industry.
What are some of the other things in this area of technology that you're focused on with your committee and also just USB as a whole?
So we also are looking at things that make the plants more resilient to the climate that they exist in. So we're looking at things like plants with deeper roots, not only to help them weather things like flood and drought, but to also store more carbon, because that's becoming another market, an emerging market where farmers can capture some value in these carbon markets. So we certainly don't want to push farmers one way or the other, but what we want to do is provide options for our growers out there, options for capturing additional value on the farm, whether it be through things like carbon sequestration, or whether it be a premium or high-value soybean, or whether it's just benefiting from new crush expansion within their state or their region.
I know that for farmers like you and I, we are, in a sense, bombarded with options when it comes to carbon and sustainability and these types of programs. How would you suggest we begin to think through that? How do I know what to do and when to do it and what makes sense for my farm?
Well, you hit the nail on the head, Andrew. What it really comes down to is a farmer needs to, first of all, understand what their goals are with the program. So many programs out there and so many different options for climate-smart practices or anything like that. But nothing's going to work if it doesn't work on your farm. And so we encourage producers to come visit us at unitedsoybean.org, where we've got some tools to help maybe kind of shepherd them through that process or help them decide what their goals may be, what they want to do or try to do on their farm. There's not a one-size-fits-all, I guess, is the main point.
I'm guessing, though, you would tell me, though, it is something that we need to be thinking about regardless. I need to be moving in this area to just be better at what I do, in this case, growing soybeans?
Absolutely, and I don't think that it's something that's out of the norm of what soybean farmers across the country have been doing for the last 80 years. We all, as we build our operations and we continue to farm and we look at that next generation coming up, we do want to be good stewards of the land. And what we do at USB on our farmers' behalf is we just want to lower those barriers to entry, lower those hurdles, that risk mitigation, so that the farmers that do want an opportunity to participate in these programs have that opportunity, and we can make that easier for them. And those that don't want to, certainly, that's their option as well.
Before we wind up, I know it's not your focus area at USB, but people will always wonder, how can we sell more beans? We want to get this price up as much as we can. What's happening on that front?
Yeah, so United Soybean Board works with our export partners at the U.S. Soybean Export Council and the World Initiative in Soy and Human Health. What we've really focused on in the last 8 years is diversifying that export market. Obviously, about 8 years ago, we had a large shock with our largest trading partner, and that forced us to pivot, and that's not always a bad thing. And what we've seen now is that we are building preference for U.S. soy. We're increasing the number of bushels and the metric tons of soybean meal that are moving outside of the U.S., and we're now pushing those soybeans and soybean meal into 80-plus countries around the world.
Kyle, I appreciate the time. Wish you all the best for the 2025 season.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Good to be with you.
Thanks for joining me this week. You can hear these Farming the Countryside programs in a variety of ways at farmingthecountryside.com, on many local radio stations, or your favorite podcast platform. And you can even watch our broadcast by just going to YouTube and searching for the Farm Journal page, where you can see this show as a video cast. That's it for this week's show. I'm Andrew McCrae. I'll catch you next time on Farming the Countryside. This edition of Farming the Countryside has been brought to you by the Top Producer Summit. Connect with farmers and ag leaders and discover strategies to grow your business. February 17th through 19th in Kansas City. Secure your spot at tpsummit.com.